Okay, let's get started today. I wanted to really thank you for coming here. At Ignite, there's a lot of interesting content, lots of sessions. I do appreciate you spending the next 20 minutes or so with me here. My name is Vitor Aparau. I am CTO of Agari, and we are an email security company focused on advanced phishing attacks. So my goal with this session is to make it an educational session. I'd like you to come away with a good understanding of these types of attacks, the advanced phishing attacks, get an understanding of who actually conducts the attacks, why they work, and probably most importantly, how you can keep them out of the Office 365 inbox. So I'm going to start by kicking it a little old school and going back to what was a simpler time in email security, the mid-2000s. Spam was essentially a solved problem, and the types of attacks that were actually in the news were ones like this, things that you probably recognize. And you and me, we could look at this attack and say, how could anyone fall for it? This is the 419 scam, the Nigerian prince advance payment scam. But the reality is that, over a span of multiple years, a large number of individuals, small businesses, nonprofits fell for this type of scam, and billions of dollars were lost because of it. Well, let's fast forward to present day. And this is a lot of what we see, the business email compromise. It's a message that claims to come from maybe a CEO, an executive, a trusted partner, to someone in your organization asking for maybe money to be wired or some sensitive information. And again, I would actually guess that pretty much every company represented here, maybe even every company at Ignite, has seen some sort of message like this come into your environment. And likely, hit the inbox of someone in your organization. Now, very few companies actually respond to this, have actually had losses as a result of this type of attack. But again, $12 billion in losses over multiple years reported by the FBI. Now I bring up these two types of attacks, the 419s and the BEC, because they are 2 points along a spectrum. Now don't get me wrong, there are some significant differences. The 419 scams were broad-based, high volume, single message sent to millions of recipients. The business email compromise are generally low volume, very targeted, a single message or a small number of messages for a given company, a given target individual. The 419 scams, they had spelling and grammatical errors, really interesting stories and narrative styles. The BECs, they're generally reasonably well written, and they often contain some personalized details. In this case, I'm at a conference today. How do the attackers actually get this information? We tell them. We often post to social media, maybe our marketing teams do. We let people know where we are, where we're going to be, when we're going to be there, things like that, and they use those details in the attacks. Moving on, the 419 scams used money transfer services, Western Union, MoneyGram, things like that. It actually took some effort for the target, for the victim of the attack to actually transfer money. The BEC scams now often use domestic bank accounts, and they use money mules to transfer the money out of the country. The domestic bank accounts give the attacks the veneer of legitimacy, of credibility. Moving on, the financial yields have actually changed substantially. It used to be that the 419 scams yielded about tens of thousands of dollars per campaign. It's gone up an order of magnitude. The FBI stats actually show that an average successful BEC attack yields about 150 or a little over 150K. Now add that up for any single criminal doing this, multiple times during a year, they can make, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions of dollars individually. The countries of origin in the 419 time frame were generally Western Africa, Nigeria. 419, for what it's worth, is the part of the Nigerian criminal code that outlaws this type of behavior. Outlawing it doesn't mean that it stops, because as we move forward to the BEC world, it is still the case that the African continent is the source of a large number of these attacks. Nigeria, Ivory Coast, South Africa. But it's also spread. So China, India, even the United States and Canada are sources of BEC attacks. So some differences, but as I mentioned, these two types of attacks are also two sides of the same coin. There are some distinct similarities. These are financially motivated criminals looking for the best way to optimize their work and optimize their yields. And then probably most importantly, they use very similar techniques. They use the notions and the concepts of social engineering and identity deception. So I'll get more to those techniques in a little bit. If you are interested, the Agari Threat Research Team compiled a report called Behind the From Lines. And they did this by actually responding to some of these BEC attacks, engaging with the criminals, tracking activities and so on across multiple criminals, multiple types of attacks. And the result is actually a fascinating read. I noticed some of you taking a picture. The slides will also be available. This link will actually, it is a really great read. The other thing that we've also done is to collaborate with law enforcement, collaborate with banks, and so there have been bank accounts shut down, and even in actually recent weeks we've had a few arrests as a result of this activity. So this is sort of an active defense type approach. We're engaging with the criminals to both understand more, but actually push back a little bit. So that notion of identity deception, it's there for the financially motivated hackers, but we're also seeing it as the primary vector of email-based phishing attack, even coming from nation states and hacktivists and so on. The criminals have effectively moved from trying to deceive systems to believe that the content of a message is safe, to trying to deceive human beings that the identity that the message claims to come from is a trusted identity. And in many of these cases, the BEC attacks don't have any active payload. There's no malicious URL, there's no malware attachment to the message itself. And even if it does, it's still the case, again, that identity deception is the primary way they're actually getting through. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. To stop these types of attacks, one of the things that we believe at Agari is that you have to actually understand them. And to do that, we created an email attack taxonomy. And the idea behind that taxonomy is that we've created a set of axes or dimensions across which you can actually look at a message, an email attack message, effectively the how, the who, the what, the why of the attack itself. And you can take any given message and evaluate it or place it on that taxonomy. The different boxes will effectively light up that represent the techniques used. And you can also evaluate a security control relative to that to the taxonomy. You can see what areas of that attack surface are actually covered. The key dimensions in this attack taxonomy that relate to identity are the first two. And the idea is that the criminals, when they're using identity deception, exploit what is arguably a fundamental flaw in the underlying email security protocols. And the flaw is that the sender of a message can put whatever they want into that from header of the message. And the from header of the message is what your email client shows you when you're actually looking at a message. So the sender can put whatever they want, and it's up to the receiving system, the recipient, to decide whether they trust what's in that from header. So the first dimension, the sender dimension of the email attack taxonomy, is about how the sender, how the attacker manipulates that from header to be able to conduct their attack. And I'll talk a little bit about the different types of manipulation that are possible. The second dimension is the identity that they put into that from header. And that might be, again, as we saw before, the identity of someone within your organization, a CEO, a CFO, an executive, or it could be someone outside of your organization. Maybe the identity, they might use the identity of a trusted partner, a customer, or in many cases just a brand that's commonly used. So these two dimensions effectively create a set of permutations of the different types of attacks that you might see. You might see a spoof, a domain spoof of an executive like a CEO, or a display name deception of using a brand's identity, or a compromised account of a partner. So those are different types of attacks, and each of them potentially require a different approach to be able to detect and then stop. So we use this taxonomy, and it's featured in a report, the Business Email Compromise Attack Trends Report, that we compiled pretty recently. And what we did was to look at the business email compromise attacks that we're seeing across a large set of different organizations, and we laid them on that taxonomy. And what we found was that somewhere around maybe 15% of attacks used exact domain spoofing. So in that case, the criminal took that from header and put in the actual domain, and often enough, the actual email address of the individual that they were trying to impersonate. And they did this generally using public cloud services. They would spin up a server in some sort of an IaaS provider, and then they would use that server to then send out messages. And because they could put whatever they wanted, they would put the actual domain in that in the from header. Many services, definitely Azure, it does validate the domain ownership before you're allowed to do that, but a lot of second tier ones don't do that, and so it's a simple way to just very cheaply launch an attack that looks like it's coming from the domain in question. Some of you may recognize that there are ways, email authentication, DMARC, and so on to prevent that, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. The vast majority of attacks use some sort of display name deception, and in that case, often enough the attackers would use some sort of a webmail account, so they would register a Gmail or a Hotmail or something like that, and they would leave that email address in place, but they would change the friendly part of the from header, effectively the one that also shows up pretty prominently in every email client, and they'd change that to the individual, or as in this case, the brand that they were trying to impersonate. A small number, probably on the order of about 5%, were lookalike domains. So these were domains that were often registered by the attacker, maybe a couple of characters off from the actual domain name that they were trying to impersonate. But one of the things that we've also started seeing a lot of is the use of internationalized domain names. So effectively, register a domain that uses a character set which has similar looking characters, homoglyphs, Cyrillic characters, for instance, and those, again, when you look at it in an email client, look like the original domain name. And then also, just with the proliferation of new top-level domains, or TLDs, we see criminals sometimes they register the TL or a .info or a .biz of a large company, and then use those for attacks. So far, all of these domain spoofs, display name deception, lookalike domains, they don't require any particular sophistication on the part of the attacker. They are using the same tools that we use, public webmail or public cloud infrastructure, they're using webmail, they're using registrars, all of what we use ourselves, and they're doing it at relatively low cost. Though we have seen in recent probably months or the increase in the use of compromised accounts as launch pads. And in this case, the criminal is actually using some sort of a previous breach to get access to an account, a legitimate email account, potentially within an enterprise, and then use that as the launch pad for identity deception attacks outside of that company. So again, these are actually harder to detect. They look very much like legitimate email. So the criminals use all of these techniques. They use domain spoofing, they use display name deception, they use lookalike domains. The bad guys are using these to conduct attacks. Guess who else is using all of these techniques? The good guys. It turns out that if your marketing team is sending out a blast of some sort, they will work with email marketing service, Exact Target, Marketo, some company like that, and those companies will use domain spoofing to actually send out a marketing campaign that uses your own domain. If you use a cloud sharing service, a Box, a Dropbox, a OneDrive, if you share with someone else, well, that service often puts your name right there in that from header, so the person who receives the sharing request knows that it's coming from you. And even lookalike domains are not uncommon. You can see them sometimes when companies have a subsidiary. There's a domain that looks just a little off from the parent company domain. So again, there are legitimate reasons to use all of these techniques, and it's critical that any solution, any email security solution that's trying to identify identity deception is able to tell the difference between the malicious and the legitimate use cases for all of these techniques. So now that we understand kind of the nature of these attacks, how the criminals use that fundamental flaw, the design flaw in the email security protocols, well, what do we do about it? Well, it turns out that the good news is that you have out-of-box anti-phishing controls with Office 365. There's Exchange Online Protection, has some of them. ATP has the bulk of the anti-phishing controls. You do have to actually, for many of them, configure them, turn them on, and so on. So we would recommend using what you have in the Office 365 level that you have already. Many companies use some sort of phishing awareness training, and that's always a good measure to take. It makes your users more aware, more vigilant. The flip side of it can be that you have users who want to be good citizens, want to help you out, click that phish alert button, and the result can be a high volume of false positive reports coming that your security team has to deal with. But that said, phishing awareness training definitely does have a place. I mentioned the use of the email authentication protocols, DMARC, SPF, TKIM. This is a way to protect your own domain from being spoofed and being spoofed against your own employees or out to the rest of the world, your customer base. Agari does have a product, Agari Customer Protect, that helps you go through that process of implementing the email authentication protocols. But all of these measures do cover some parts of that overall attack surface. What we've seen many companies recognize is that there is a need for advanced impersonation controls in addition to those techniques. Agari Enterprise Protect is such an advanced impersonation control. Now, if you have the out-of-box controls, why do you need more? What we did was to take those permutations that I mentioned of the different types of attacks, and we put multiple security products into a lab. What you can see is the different types of impersonation, the different identities, whether they're internal or external. And what we found was that to get full 360 control, 365 control maybe, you need a combination of the Microsoft controls that are available to you in ATP and a solution like Agari's, and that does cover much more of that overall attack surface. The way we approach this and the core of the data science that underlines how we actually detect these types of attacks is that we actually ask and answer 3 different questions when we see any given message. Question number 1 is, which identity is being used to send this attack? And probably more specifically, which identity is perceived by the recipient of the message to be sending this attack? So we look at the identity markers, what's in the from header, potentially the subject, and even the body of the message to determine which identity is being used for that attack. And that means that your CEO may use her work address, her personal email address. She may use a sharing service. Well, all of those 3 types of messages, even if they have different email addresses, all map to that same identity. And that's part of the first phase of what we do. Number two, we then look and see, does this message that's coming in actually match the behavior that we expect to be applied to a message of that, from that identity? Is it, does it match the model that we have, or is it anomalous? And we've built up models of behavior, of expected behavior, for at this point probably tens to hundreds of millions of different identities across the internet. So we can see if a message is close or pretty far away from the expected behavior. And then the third question that we ask, is what is the relationship between the identity that's claiming to send the message and the recipient? And that's important because that social context actually allows us to tell the difference between some of those legitimate use cases and the malicious use cases. So asking and answering accurately at scale these three questions are a critical part of being able to have a solution that covers that entire identity deception attack surface. This platform, the data science platform, we call Agari Identity Intelligence. It underlies the two products that I mentioned before. Agari Enterprise Protect, which is on that inbound channel. Look, it's an advanced impersonation control, and it protects your employees from those inbound identity deception-based attacks. Agari Customer Protect, as I mentioned, used to implement the email authentication protocols, DMARC, SPF, DKIM. Actually, could I get a count of how many people actually have a DMARC record for their own domain here? Actually a good number. And how many of you are at a reject for that, on that record? A smaller number. Again, it is a great security step to take to protect your own domain from being used for attacks, and it works against your customers, against your own employees, and so the goal is to protect what is a pretty important channel that the attackers can exploit. I'm just going to talk really briefly about Agari Enterprise Protect and how it deploys into an Office 365 environment. The idea behind it is to make it as simple a deployment as possible. And the way we do that is that Agari becomes a journaling endpoint for Exchange Online. And so the messages are delivered to the inbox, are journaled, come to us. We do a quick evaluation of the identities, answer those three questions, come up with a score or verdict, and then are able to take action generally within a sub-second or a couple of seconds of the message coming into that inbox, and we're able to either delete it or move it out of the inbox. So again, a very simple deployment. What you get out of it is an advanced impersonation control, and then we are able to tell you what we found and what we stopped. And we use that same taxonomy, the idea of individual display name imposters, brand imposters, and so on, to tell you what we found and what we stopped. So that's it. I really thank you again for joining me here. If you want to know more about advanced attacks, business email compromise, about active defense and the Agari products, our booth is about 200 feet in that direction. I will be available after this session for any questions, either here or at the booth. And there are a set of resources. I have links within the deck, the slide deck, and I think the slide deck is going to be available through the MS Events application. So you should be able to find those links. There's some great resources, some great reads. The Behind the From Lines report, for instance, is a great one. So with that, thank you so much for joining me today.